What?
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, be
Hey,
quiet.
that's a good looking hat.
Hey, I got to introduce this thing. Be quiet. All right, so we're skipping the intro music because we're 3 minutes late, and why even bother, right? So we're live. We got quite a crew here tonight already. Of course, Slick Dissident, my man, always at the ready, and the domosexual Topher Gardner, Adam Stevens, aka Mr. Permie Bear, the gifter
What's
of
happening?
this hat that I got on here, and our boy Kyle Denton, court alchemist and plant wizard extraordinaire.
What's up?
This is gonna get real rowdy, so I'm gonna try to moderate, but I'm also gonna try to do as little talking as possible and just enjoy the show. But before we get into it, why are we talking to Adam? Other than the fact that Adam is just like a ultimate helpful dude who crushes at everything all the time. And of course, when you ask him for a favor, like, hey, will you come on my stream, or will you build me a structure on my property, or, will you fix my life? I hear that Adam will just do anything for you. So I asked him to come on the stream. I asked him for this hat. I got a yes for both of those. And we're going to talk about permaculture philosophy, which is what Adam put onto the record for his annual speech at the Beartaria National Festival. But, bear or not, or bear adjacent or not, this is a group of legends right here. And we're going to talk about some fun stuff. So, Adam, introduce yourself to the people. You've only been on InnerVerse once. Tell them about your company, all of that good stuff.
Sure. So I'm Adam Stevens, certified permaculture designer, former stockbroker, former commercial banker, now seed purveyor / farmer / construction dude, all around, just stuff. Got a bunch of kids, 5 kids. We're here in the Missouri Ozarks on 43 acres, trying to live our dream of taking what's in here and actually putting it on the landscape and turning the vision into reality with our hopefully highly diversified permaculture farm. And as a natural extension from that, Grateful Harvest Seed Company was born out of desire to help people grow and solve supply chain issues that we found during COVID. And it's just been great from there.
Yeah, dude, you could say a lot more about how awesome your seed company is. Let's look at the website.
Yeah, there it is. Woohoo! So we've got, 250 plus varieties. We focus on open pollinated and heirloom. For those who are not familiar with the difference, open pollinated is more or less more modern varieties that have been genetically stabilized, so they're true to form or true to type when you save seed. Heirlooms have been around for a little bit longer. Really have a penchant for tomatoes. Absolutely love tomatoes. I think the first year that we decided to start the seed company and save seeds,
tempting tomatoes.
54 varieties of tomatoes, I think. So we kind of went nuts with that. But yeah, just all things gardening is kind of what we try to focus on as far as the seeds are concerned. Really have a passion for, and this is, hopefully a future project of the seed company, for education, to try to break out of the realm of what normal seed companies do, which is just kind of hawk their wares, but really try to take people through the basics of soil health, not from an agrochemical standpoint, but from a holistic, natural standpoint, where we could really dive into soil biology, which is the basis of all fertility, and, hopefully roll out robust education that helps people go from wherever they are to really active biological soil that just crushes for them. So that's that's the goal with that.
Right on. Topher, what do you think about Mr. Permie Bear?
Mr. Permie is a big reason why we're in Missouri. I think he's awesome. I always say to people, just as a joke, to kind of rib him, he's always up for a laugh. I'm like, if you ever want something done, ask the busiest person you know. So naturally, I ask him about 25 things a day. So
Yeah.
yeah. It's pretty awesome to see that Adam's like the little hub of the wheel of activity for all of us transplants here.
There really wouldn't be a Beartaria festival the way that there is. I know that a lot of people are involved with making that happen, but you do step up and
No, it's
lead in
him.
all kinds of ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I was
Without
really
a
fortunate the
doubt.
first year. I was fortunate the first year to be able to put everything on hold and really try to help bring that vision to fruition. So it's just kind of continued from there.
Well, why don't you talk about the festival as a whole and maybe about this year's event too? Because I want to see more, even just a bit like Bear adjacents there, InnerVerse followers there, right? People
Yeah,
that like Slick's work. It's just a place, in my opinion, where not crazy people come together and give each other hope and high fives. I mean, I was falling for the whole like replacement theory. We're not repopulating enough, and society's going to crumble. And then I saw Beartaria Festival, and the kids like outnumber the adults, and it's children of people who get it and who are good people and are mostly even homeschooling or homesteading or attempting to do their best with those type of non-external authoritative ways of having a family. And so I'm like, okay, so the good people are making way more kids. Actually, I think everything's going to be fine. So yeah, I want to entice more people to check it out. It's Labor Day weekend every year. We've done it 3 times. It's I'm super blessed that it just popped up in my backyard, where I've lived my
totally.
whole life.
Totally. I feel the same way, with as busy as we are, living farm life. If it didn't happen here, it would be a really big stretch for us to be able to make it out there. So I share the blessing. Um, so the Beartari Times National Festival is a big gathering of like-minded people centered around Owen Benjamin and the bear community, but it's really so much more than that. It's really we like to say meeting old friends for the first time, and that's really how it was, especially the first year. It's a little bit less than that the third year because we've met so many people, so you can't really say that you've met them for the first time. But a common theme is, you just get into the gravy with somebody and you run into so many people that, at least for me, are on the same basic bandwidth, right? Where we're pursuing accountability, we're pursuing family, as we like to say, the good, the true, the beautiful, and really a meaningful life where we're not looking to external authority. We're not looking to blame our problems on anybody. We're not looking to, necessarily change the way that systems operate. Really, what I am trying to do, and I think that a lot of the bears share that, and a lot of the people attending that, is to, just opt out where you want and opt in where you do want. I'm the best white actor in all of Beartaria. That's hilarious.
Dude, Bowler Bear in the
And
house. Bowler Bear
totally,
is legit hilarious.
he is. He is. Um,
So is
it,
Adams. Adam's skits are he's on it, man.
Maybe we'll dig
yeah,
up
we
a
have a lot
skit
of
to
fun,
play. The
and that
Princess
that
Bride
actually
one
fits
is the
perfectly.
best one for Beartaria promo. That was
Yeah,
too good.
yeah, I loved that one.
You play a mean Sicilian. Somebody send me that. We'll put that on later.
I think I have it probably somewhere. But yeah, and that
Don't
the
lie, you
skits
have that
brings
as
a
your
whole thing,
screensaver.
dude. I should. I totally should. So we try to have a lot of fun doing it, and that's kind of the purpose of the skits, right? Is like, obviously it's promotional material, but we don't get paid for it. We started doing it just because we thought it would be fun and a way to, just like get people excited, and then it's just morphed into this thing where, a bunch of us just to get together and hang out and have fun. Like, we don't even really have scripts per se. We have loose concepts, and we just scat all day, and it's great. And that's kind of like the theme of the Beartaria, festival as well, is like we have a loose idea of what's going to happen, but there's a whole lot of scatting involved. where we just kind of
Yeah.
play it by ear, and you run into these awesome people and you get roped into great conversations. And as an attendee, that happens all the time, but also as like somebody who's helping put on the show, that happens all the time. And so some of the delays that we experience are because we're deep in the gravy with somebody who just caught you as you were walking by, and you enter into this amazing conversation. And so it's just this incredible high vibe of people who are just, they get it, and we're all about the same basic ideas. You can forget about all of the stuff that doesn't matter, all of the small talk. Like when I was in banking, I hated the small talk, because between people that I worked with or clients that I served, other than being their banker, I had very little in common with them. And I find that that's a lot of people within society, right? We're forced to interact with people that, we don't necessarily have a problem with, but it's not really like our tribe. It's not people that you'd really go out of your way. And so then you get bogged down in this small talk, mire, where everything is just surface level. Well, at the festival, we just get to skip all of that, and we get to get right into meaningful conversations with people. And you just get this amazing level of comfortability and just awesomeness for an entire weekend. It's almost too much, but not quite.
Yeah, you can't even go like 30 paces within 5 steps. You're talking to somebody and you're there for like 20 minutes minimum. So just like I'm going to go get a drink over at Winky Bears and I'll be back in a second. You might not be. And then, a lot of trolls online because of Owen's polarizing character. A lot of trolls online are quick to be like cult or land scam. But you were talking about, how we have this commonality that we can share in ideas, but it's more about the ideas we question than the specific ideas that we consider like a dogma. There is no group dogma. But we collectively question the same things, and I think totally. That's where there's power. There's definitely not like a unifying, you must believe this to be part of the group. And the only real scam is the dome scam. And that was just this year.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Real good point.
Yeah. I embezzled it all. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, Topher not only got slave labor, but the slaves paid him to do the labor. It was pretty cool.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
What's up, James?
Next level.
All right, we got a full window of people.
Hey, everybody.
Nice. Hey.
Can you hear me good?
Oh, I like that voice.
Sounding great.
Hey, everybody.
Nice mustache.
Good to see you, brother.
Good to see all you fellas.
Hey, everybody.
We haven't had a 6-person show for ages. This is gonna be great. So I wanna give Kyle some opportunity to talk, because I know that he had some stuff on his mind in terms of the permaculture subject matter that maybe we could open up into.
Yeah, maybe.
Nice.
I just want to say thanks for having me. Man, this is a great group of legends here. I had a great opportunity to be at the first Beartarian. I haven't been back yet since, but I was going to go last year and some other things happened, but I'll be back. But anyway, in our first year, Mr. Permie Bear was my neighbor at the vending area, just like he's my neighbor here. And we got to know each other. And ever since then, I've had a few conversations, and every single one has been very enlightening. It's also been very helpful. And this particular year, I got into permaculture. I have some land that I'm trying to develop. And one of the things I really liked about your intro, Adam, is talking about taking what's up in here and putting it on the land, because the way that I'm coming to it from a permaculture standpoint is almost like the hermetic in, as above, so below, within, the land being a reflection of your inner state of mind, and even further and further into a community oriented way of an intergenerational way. It's very fascinating to me. And so I'm thinking about how you can ferment the weeds and even the vegetables that you're growing. In fact, this is the second year in a row now that I've got vegetable seeds from Grateful Harvest, and it is an awesome time to enjoy the garden with my son. And one of the things I've never experienced before was planting the beets late in the fall and then having them come up early in the spring. And now we use those seeds again. We planted them for a second harvest. And I've never, in all of the times I've ever bought seeds and ever made a garden, I've never had a vegetable where it was so willing to be fertile again. So thank you for your awesome seeds and contribution to our family's health in that regard. But yeah, I'm just thinking about the microcosm and macrocosm of permaculture and how it begins in the mind, but also, you know, from a family standpoint, and the activities of our children and our spouses in the, you know, the labor and everything like that, and how that reciprocates into the land. And just to see if you have any comments on just that general idea of correspondence, basically.
Yeah, it totally does. And I suspect that there's a lot more going on beyond, you know, biology, just even interaction, you know, where we talk about etheric energies or whatever you want to, you know, call them, law of correspondence, all that fun stuff. But I think that, you know, to start with the basic concept of intergenerational wealth and fertility, right? Like that hits the permaculture principle of putting back more than you take, right? And so when you plug your beets back in the ground in order to get seed, like you've done that, right? So you take, say, a dozen beets that you've grown, you put them back in the ground, and then you get, you know, ounces of seed. Well, now you've contributed something back to that soil, and you've seen the positive return from that instead of just continuing to extract, right? And the other part of that is like I really feel that part of what sets our seeds aside from other seeds, even though some of the stuff we get are through the same wholesale channels that other people get, is intention. When you put that intention into growing food for your family, or really trying to work with the land instead of trying to force your will on that, and that's all encompassed in every aspect of permaculture, right? We're trying to work within nature and natural systems and natural law as opposed to imposing our will. I think that the return that you get from that just gets amplified, right? Like I've seen in my own experience, whether it's growing a garden, milking cows, you know, working with clients, the fact that you care, and that you care enough to go the extra mile, and that you're doing something simply for the fact that it's good and you have the love in it, you get an extra boost, right? So we can take those, this blows my mind. So we, you know, we do germination tests on our seeds. We're required to, and it's also just a good practice. So we can take seeds that we've bought wholesale, and they're all labeled with, you know, germination test dates and percentages. And after they stay with us for a little while, we actually get better germination percentages than what they did through their initial tests. Now, there's obviously like conditions and things like that, but I really think a big component of dealing with natural systems is your intention. And that's something that we can't really quantify, at least on a, you know, scientific testing basis. But from a personal experience standpoint, you can absolutely quantify that. And I think that, you know, just putting that intention to there as you start working your land, even if you don't hit an optimal plan when you start, the fact that you are starting does wonders for what you get in return. You know, I think especially if you're starting from a place that's been used and abused, is it's just like, oh my gosh, someone cares, let's go. And so when you get into like fermenting and things like that, like that's the extra love, right? So you're taking this thing that you've already grown or harvested, and now you're taking that extra intentional step to try to make it better, make things more available, whether it's, you know, for medicinal use or whether you're turning it back into a fertilizer, right? Like that, you don't do that by accident. You don't do that through extractive farming. The only people fermenting plant juices and things like that to try to feed that back are people who care. And so I think it's really, really interesting, and I'm excited for you, having started that journey.
You're in the spotlight now, dude. You better try harder.
Figuratively and literally.
Yeah, thanks, man. I think it's really cool to have the ferments. We were talking about the ferments, and that being another alchemical point where you can take that fermentation and fertilize the culture of your own microbiome in the case of like kimchi or sauerkraut, or you could take that fermentation and put it back into the soil, and there's the microbiome, there's the macrobiome, and all of that comes into play with permaculture. And it's so fun. It's so much fun to imagine and to play with in your own imagination, but also the benefits that you can see in the land. And so, yeah, just starting out, first growing season, working on it. Really, the other thing that I'm thinking about too is I'm kind of, I feel like I'm antagonizing in a way some of the land that I'm on, because I am trying to impose my will on it in the way that I'm taking up so-called invasive plants and, making room for something that I want to put down. And that's become a philosophical tongue tie for me to reckon, and also to find solutions for. One of the things that I'm thinking about is how, and what I've been working with actually, is taking some of these vines that are taking over the trees, cutting them up, putting them in the biochar reactor, and then and then putting the biochar of the plants all around it. And it's, to me, one of the things that I think about is like, I'm putting the prisoner's head
Dead
on a
remains.
pike.
Exactly. You're
It's like,
ashing.
this is what happens to anybody who invades.
That's right.
Go
You're doing
tell
an
your
ashing.
friends.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
But on the other hand, it's also an act of love in that I'm intentionally caring for this land, and and I'm seeing I see a difference between the biochar that comes from the pine cones, that comes from the vines, that comes from the honeysuckle, that comes from the wood chip pile, and
Yeah.
it all has different textures, and it all has a different. I can't say, it just has a different feel, and it almost like it's asking to be put back in these places. But anyway, I bring that up because I don't want to be and I'm so glad James is here, because he and I talk about this too. But I don't want to be the struggler that's condemned to till the land and be in the bramble patch. But sometimes it's just a mental flip. But I just wonder if some of these instances come up for you, if you have any thoughts on that. And
Totally. So I think the first thing that I want to mention is that, like technology or like certain words, the action of disturbance in and of itself isn't bad. It's all about your intention. Disturbance is absolutely 100% going to happen. It's completely natural, and it's completely necessary. Without disturbance, you don't have a way to do anything different, right? And so the question is, well, what kind of disturbance? And then what are you going to do as a result of that? Take digging swells, for example, where I'll take a mini excavator or, a single bottom plow or a two bottom plow, and I'll go through and I will rip up the landscape, right? And so you could look at that and be like, oh my gosh, a two bottom plow, like that's like the worst tool that you could possibly use. But then it's like, well, my intention is to capture and hold water instead of letting it go off of the farm. And so it's what I do with that disturbance, and then what I do in the wake of that really is the defining factor of what happens next, and was it good or bad. So I think that a lot of people tend to look at permaculture in a very hippie way, if that makes sense, where it's like all we do is we hug our trees, we never disturb our soil, we're just like harvesting whatever comes up, and I love every weed, and it's just like, oh, I'll get some stuff and I just need to plant more. And I'm like, no, I am genociding Japanese knotweed. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I'm genociding foxtail.
Genocide.
Right? You're genociding your vines that are growing up your trees, and you're turning those, you're throwing them in the literal oven, and you're turning them into a beneficial aspect. So even tilling, right? Tilling isn't bad. It's about appropriate usage of technology. Sometimes manual disturbance and decompaction of the soil is absolutely necessary. It just is. It's like going to the chiropractor. Sometimes you need a physical adjustment. Something's out of whack, right? You break a bone. Like someone's got to get in there and they've got to disturb it and they've got to put it back together. So don't get caught up on the idea of like, I can't do anything because disturbance is bad. It's what are your next steps? So when I go in and I disturb, I'm in an ideal world, I'm planting a cover crop behind it and I'm choosing the cover crop, right? Like we did white clover this year in a big part of the garden. And so I tarped all of that, which destroys all of the living plant material on top of the soil. And it's not quite like tilling, but like it knocks out a bunch of stuff. But now I have a clean seed bed, so I can go in and sow a nitrogen fixing crop that's going to build an enormous amount of organic matter, and it's going to feed nitrogen, and it's going to suppress the weeds that I don't want in order to allow me opportunity for the things that I do want. And so the biggest mistake that we make with disturbance is not being ready for that follow-up. It's like, okay, I did this thing, now what? And you want to be to cause the least amount of damage. You just want to be on top of that now what part as quickly as you can, whether it's an immediate thing or there are certain instances where you're like, okay, I've disturbed this thing, but I can't do anything yet because if I do this, that, and the other, right? So it's most important to just have a good plan and know what you're going to do and to not shy away from the confrontation of soil disturbance. If you look at tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, these are massive disturbance events. Look at the the floodplains. Those are the most fertile soil, and it only comes about because of a large scale disturbance. And so it's not a bad thing in and of itself. It's just appropriate use of, in this case, technology. And it would be the same thing with biochar, right? If you biochard everything on your property, but you never planted anything and you just like are spreading biochar everywhere, but like you never charge it. So you soak up all of your nutrients, you don't manage anything, like it could be a bad thing theoretically, because you clear cut your whole property and biochar it and throw it all back down and paint Roundup on all your tree stumps. Like that's not a good thing. But you're like, oh, but biochar was so great. Well, yeah, but it was an inappropriate use of the technology.
Well, we're getting really advanced here, and I'm such an amateur that this is even like over my head a bit. So I'm going to pause, and I'm going to read this super chat from Gnostic Academy. I'm paying these gentlemen's gay away. You're welcome. Questions?
What?
Kyle, when did you join Alice in Chains?
Wah, 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 wah.
Permie, do your Jerusalem tomatoes come with kippas?
Absolutely.
And Slick, why are you the only real man who still wears feathers? Cultural appropriation is
That's
the
right.
answer.
I wear my headdress on my sleeve.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to kick it over to James. I think he's wanting to say hi. He's been in here. And then we'll hear from Topher. We'll hear from Gabe. And maybe even shift things a little bit towards like permaculture philosophy is life philosophy. We can use allusions to gardening and farming within that and examples. But that's kind of the direction I want to take it from here. But yeah, James, get in there.
Cool. Just to kind of round off, the disturbance isn't a bad thing. Our piece of property, we've been here for about 4 years now, and this was a highly degraded strawberry plantation. And the place had basically been strip mined for everything that it's worth, and there's no fertility, really heavily compacted clay soils, and so you got to get some disturbance in there. So we practice no till, low till, but no till except the first one, because like you got to have something to break that up, and then you have to have a plan of action that you're going to plant it back immediately. If you can't plant it, mulch it as heavily as you can. That's one of the things, like if you're going to go from sod or a lawn to something, you really want to first get that initial disturbance and then put a lot of carbon on top of it. So we did wood chips and horse manure and a bunch of other stuff. So we grow a lot of mushrooms. So the end product, aside from mushrooms, is compost, and it turns into soil within 6 months. It does a really good job down here in South Louisiana. It breaks down very, very quickly. And so don't be afraid to create that disturbance, but have a plan. Are you going to put annuals? Are you looking for an immediate return? If so, you're going to have to add some fertility to that soil if it's already highly degraded. Or are you going to go with perennials? If so, have a good plan for when you're going to plant so that you can do your disturbance before, and it's not just going to sit and idle. Again, unless you have a plan of action that you can put something in there that's going to start building biomass and getting the soil into the direction that you want it to go. So that's kind of, I just wanted to play off of that a little bit, because we don't grow a lot of annuals. Like I don't have a lot of annual space. I try to put a lot of perennials because we're on like a little French fry. So it's super narrow, 2 acres. I try to put all of our perennial production on the north side. That way we have the most southern exposure for all of the annuals that we can interplant into there. And so getting familiar with land design, getting familiar with where the water is and how it's moving on your property, those are like the very basic things that start to bring you into that deeper philosophy of being on the land. Like you start to become more of a part of it because you're feeling whenever the sun is shifting. Like you're smelling it on the air, you're feeling it on your skin that, oh wow, like we are past the longest day of the year. You can feel it without just going, oh yeah, that looks about like we're there, fellas. No, like you feel it, and it becomes a bigger part of yourself.
Totally. I completely agree. And to answer the super chat that popped up there, absolutely. It is 100% better to plant something than to leave the ground fallow. Doesn't matter what it is. You could do microgreen broccoli as a cover crop. You could do lettuce. Like, it doesn't matter. You just want something, because the basis of all soil fertility is biology. Biology cannot exist in fallow soil. It gets sterilized. And so anything is absolutely better than nothing, even if it's weeds. Doesn't matter.
Yep.
When I mowed the grass on a weekly basis, I think of how shameful it is that we spend so much energy on so much grass, and then we even, have this denial. I'm not a sheep. I'm not a sheep. Every time I mow the grass, I'm sitting there telling me, you're not a sheep, dude. You're just mowing the grass. It's just grass. Don't make it too big of a thing.
That's funny.
And it's
Yeah,
even
that's
called
awesome.
it's even called mowing. So it even kind of has the cows
Moo.
call. Yeah.
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 Mowing it down. Totally.
Adam, what can you say about the quality of soil in Missouri? I remember going to Snake Jones' property, and there was a lot of iron, and even like, what can you say about the quality of the soil there?
Well, where we are at, it's highly degraded. Northern Missouri is a whole different story, but we are in South Central Missouri, and
What?
the
South
landform
Central.
here is what? It's already degraded by the nature of what
Southwest.
it is. That's right. Yeah, we represent that Southwest. So it's been used and abused a really, really long time. This is something I recently found out just over the summer. We did a meetup with some local bear adjacents who run a native seed company, Hamilton Native Outpost.
Yep.
And their family has been here for a really long time. And so we kind of asked about like what's going on. Why are all of the farms so used and abused? Like my farm, I asked my 86-year-old neighbor one day, I was like, Tex, tell me about my farm when it was nice. And he laughed at me and he's like, man, your farm has never been nice. I was like, oh, it's like, what's the context for that? Like somebody had to care at some point in time and they really didn't. So in talking to the Hamiltons, they're like, no, you need to understand the history. Like most of the generational people here settled the land as part of the Homestead Act, right? And so if you were willing to work the land for 5 or 7 years, I don't remember which, they just gave it to you. And so what people would do is they would show up, they would clear cut the forest, or they would plow up the prairie, depending on, you know, what it is that you had, and they would extract everything that they could from that because they knew in 7 years they could just move over there and they could start all over again. So they didn't care about fertility. They didn't care about putting in fertility systems. They didn't care about, you know, watching erosion and all of that stuff because it was free. Why should they care? And so there is a lot of people who have gotten better, but you know, at least in this part of Missouri, it's historically been very, very poor. And oftentimes very poor people, you know, in a hand to mouth existence don't really get the exposure that you would think that they would to like the normal natural ways of doing things. All right. Like you get this, at least I shouldn't say you, me speaking for myself, you know, I have this tendency to kind of romanticize the like the mid 1800s where everyone's composting and we're using horse manure and, you know, all of these things. And that wasn't necessarily the case. There was a lot of people who were just doing what other people did, and it was really poor habits. So take, not to get too far out there, but an example of that within farming is like barbed wire. Like around here, when Colt, the guy who, you know, told us about the Homesteading Act, when he was growing up, everybody just ran 2 strands of barbed wire. That's all they needed because they didn't have ATVs and trucks and all of that. So they worked with their cows on foot on a regular basis. And they didn't have, you know, 1,000-acre farms. Now we're 5 and 6 strands because people have cars and trucks and ATVs and massive cattle operations where they may not see their cows ever. And so the management has changed, but it was never really like a good idea, right? Like they started with the 2 strands of barbed wire to contain the cows. They weren't practicing rotational grazing and things. And as the quality of the forage goes down and the stocking numbers go up, now the cows are like trying to get out. And so you have to add more barbed wire. And so it's a shell of what it could be. But the thing that really gets me excited about permaculture and agriculture and really natural systems as a whole is God wants abundance. He's created natural systems that all you have to do is care, and they have the ability to just heal and explode, and you can make such a positive impact in such a short period of time if you understand the basic principles and you're willing to put in the work. And so the fact that we have highly eroded soils to me really isn't, you know, it's a challenge and it's kind of a bummer, but it's not a deal killer, right? So like if we can do it here, anybody can do it. Like building fertile soil is absolutely possible.
No, our buddy Snake Jones, when I was out there, he was building his own hoogles.
Nice.
Yeah, awesome.
You guys all familiar with hoogle technology? Any hoogle tips?
It's the best.
Man, I've only
It's
had
the best.
issues with
I don't know what this is.
with rodents getting in there and overwintering. And if I put any root crops in, they're done before spring. I like them for perennial systems. Like if you can put something in there, like a really cool pear tree, and then maybe find, I don't know. I plant a lot of sweet potatoes, and I don't, I get so bummed out whenever I'm like, whoa, look at all these really healthy vines. And then I pull up a bunch of like quarter of potatoes that have just been munched. And that's in the summer. So like I've had Jerusalem artichokes, and I planted them. They were great, grew like 8-10 feet tall. And then
Nice.
I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to let them do their thing, because they can build a lot of organic matter in the soil. And come next spring, they're not even there. Can't even find a nubbin.
Oh man,
They're
that's
like,
frustrating.
it's like a lasagna of yard waste. You put your cordwood down, or your big branches down, and then bigger branches, and then maybe some yard clippings, and then some mulch and some compost and things like that, so that you get layers and layers and layers, and eventually it'll start to break down. And
It's like the placenta casserole lasagna of yard waste.
yeah,
Say that 3 times fast.
No.
Yeah, hugelkultur is actually German for hill culture. And so like traditional hugelkultur is actually a lot bigger than what most people do. You know, like most people do like a hugelkultur mound by building it the way it was described, and it'll be maybe like a foot tall. But like historically, the hugelkultur beds were, you know, like 8 feet wide, 4 feet tall, like these giant pyramids. So, you know, you get the benefit of the slowly decomposing wood debris that feeds the soil. It creates a giant sponge. If you think of like a rotten log and how wet that is, right? That's in your soil feeding your plants. But then the other component of that is you've started to harness some vertical growing space, right? Because now you've taken a flat surface area like this and you've peaked it. You've therefore increased your surface area, but then you've also given yourself 2 different microclimates. You have a microclimate here that's different than the microclimate here. And so that's another thing that you can further leverage. And you can make all kinds of like awesome shapes. You can make sun traps. You can make, you know, shade traps. You can, I mean, there's so much that you can do. They're so cool, but I haven't found a good way to implement them yet on our farm, because it's just, it's a thing.
It's a lot of work.
Totally.
Okay, so hugelkultur is raised beds made out of like placenta lasagna. Okay.
Basically,
No,
yeah.
but it's like mounds of earth and wood and compost. Is that how
Well,
you're doing it?
I can give you an example. Like, so Adam brought up the Hamilton Northern Outpost, the people that do the reseeding of this area with savanna grasses, with natural native grasses. And they've been educating people on how like a lot of the forest that's here is an unnatural forest. It's like, you know, a lot of the trees were brought in from the settlers and this, that, and the other. This area used to be like a savanna. So a lot of us have forest on our property that's way overgrown. The forest that's here is kind of unhealthy because they would come in here and clear cut whatever tree that they were going for, say it was oak. And then, you know, then you'd have millions and millions of saplings that just shoot and they all compete, and nobody's burning off any of the leaf detritus every year like the Native Americans would. So you end up having just a lot of demand on nutrient base in the forest floor here. That's not really it's kind of crowded things out, right? So what's a healthy thing to do is to go in the first few months that we were here. We went in and cut out 60 saplings just off of 2 acres of the property. You know, your tree hugger would be like, "Oh no, you're killing the trees," or whatever. And I was like, "No, I can use that wood for firewood. I can use that wood for huggle beds." But I'm also opening space up so that the bigger, healthier trees can get bigger and healthier, and more sun can actually hit the forest floor, where the mycelium and all the mushrooms and everything like that can start to take off, because mushrooms do like a little bit of sun here and there. So it's just like it's just a matter of taking that wood then and then moving it to an area where I need swales, or an area where I'm, a few years down the road going to plant it. You lay the wood, kind of parallel to itself, and then you come over it with earth. And that earth over time with the humidity and everything, it just kind of bakes down a little bit into the placenta lasagna. And now you have this wonderful nutrient rich area that you can guide water. Like this particular property that we're on has some hills on it, so it's really good for getting water away from places and getting water to other places. I think it's a magnificent way to utilize the saplings that are kind of crowding out some of the other trees. I think it's a wonderful art in agriculture.
Totally. Now you can do hugel in like traditional raised beds as well. So,
Hmm.
people will build like 2 foot deep raised beds, and they'll fill like the bottom with wood and yard waste. And what
Yeah.
happens over time is as the fungi and bacteria break that down, is you get this concentrated humus, which is a giant sponge for both nutrients and water. And so like a really established hugel bed, whether it's traditional, in the ground hugel culture, or whether it's raised beds that you're using that same principle, like you can drought proof these growing areas because the organic matter and humus is so high in that soil. It's just this massive sponge at the bottom where the plants can reach it.
Hmm.
In Portuguese, we sing songs that are the title of the song is Soel, and it means just me. And I just think that there's something kind of poetic sometimes from one language to the next. Like, there's a lot of self intimacy with getting out in the garden.
Hmm.
Totally.
Yeah.
You guys have great conversation discipline. Nobody's like trying to climb their way in there, maybe waiting for me to call on them.
It's because we don't have a giant lag for some weird reason, and so we actually don't have to try to talk over each other unknowingly.
That's true.
Well, I named this conversation "The Obstacle is the Course" because you did a great job describe. Like, I like to tell this to people all the time when they're facing challenges, maybe something that seems insurmountable. We're working on that in a biofield tuning session, and we get ourselves to the point where, hey, what if the obstacles are like hurdles when you run in a race? You don't run away from the hurdles. You run towards them and go over them. They tell you where to go. They don't tell you where you can't go. They tell you where to go. And I thought, well, who doesn't love an obstacle course when they're a child, right? Like, when did the idea of obstacles, aka problems, become like, I can't. He won't let me, And in your Beartaria talk, you just did such a great job hashing out that idea and giving examples from your life. I thought maybe we can open up that topic, man.
Totally. So that stems from the permaculture principle or idiom that the problem is the solution. And so you can look at that a lot of different ways, but really the crux of it is that every, just like disturbance, right? Disturbance is going to happen. That's your problem. But it also means that there's change, right? And so the problem is the solution is a way in which we look at the change that is oftentimes presented to us, whether it's in the form of pests in the garden or tornadoes or floods or personal relationships. And it's a way in which we problem solve by disarming the adversarial item that has come to us and saying, okay, well, this isn't necessarily what I think it is. Let me evaluate it for what it really is and come up with a way to handle that. And so like one of my favorite things within that sphere for permaculture is Bill Mollison, the co-founder of permaculture, is famously quoted as saying, you don't have a slug problem, you have a duck deficit. And so you can look at slugs eating all of your, all of your lettuce. And you'd be like, oh my gosh, I've got to, go nuclear on these guys if it existed and all of that. Or you can look at that and say, well, nature has given me an abundant food source. Now, what eats slugs? Ducks, right? So it's like, oh, I don't know if you've ever seen a duck eat a slug, but it is the most disgusting thing. But they love them, right? And so from the pest, now you have meat and eggs. And so it's reframing the challenges and saying, okay, how else can I look at this? What can I take from this situation and then use it to my advantage? Every input requires an output. Every output can be an input for something else. And so we're really talking about problem solving creatively. And what I have found in my own life is that when you are willing to look at anything in your life through that lens, that's where the genius comes from, right? Like if you're constantly looking at how do I solve this problem? Oh, this thing has come upon me and like, oh, this just really sucks. You're never going to hit that spontaneous genius that allows you to look at it differently and think of something that nobody has thought of before, or maybe that you haven't thought of before. If you constantly just trying to put out a fire instead of saying, what can I use the fire for? Like think of that example, right? So what can you do with fire? Any number of things. You can blacksmith with it. You can use it to heat water and spin steam turbines. You can cure things. You can heat your house. You can make biochar, right? Like that's a handful of things from fire. Or you could look at it and be like, I just have to put this fire out. Whereas the fire was a solution to a whole host of other challenges. And it's just reframing that lens in which we interact with the world that makes all of the difference. And that's really the core of what permaculture is it is a design language, a way in which we look at everything that it means to be and exist as a human and apply natural principles and a different type of philosophy to that to change the way in which we interact with the world and therefore our relationships with everyone and everything.
Yeah, I really like that you're calling it a language. Like, how do we translate this? How do we translate this language to people that say, I don't have the time? That's a common thing whenever I'm telling people, well, this is what I do for work, and then the rest of the time I'm pretty much gardening. Like it's just part of my life is that I walk around my gardens, that I tend to the land, and I just try to see how everyone's doing. Every character has a different personality. And a lot of people are reluctant to give up what they're already accustomed to, their routine, whether it's something that that is a culture that's developed in them, whether it's like watching sports ball, but they feel intuitively that they're gonna have to give something up to make way for this. And how do you translate the language to let them know that, hey, this is worth learning?
The interesting thing about that question is that I believe we already know that language intuitively. Everybody does. That's because that language in which we're speaking when we're talking permaculture is the language of nature. It is literally everywhere around it. Whether you recognize it or not is a question, but we intuitively know that. You can look at a river and you can understand that that is the same natural pattern as a tree. It's the exact same dendritic pattern. Many things concentrate to one, or one spreads out to many. So I don't think that we need to teach people the language. They already know it. What we need to do is just bring that forward in their consciousness. And I think that just introducing people to the idea that you can choose to look at the world this way is the biggest and the first step. Because you're going to be thinking about things all day anyway. We all do stuff anyway. And it's just a matter of choosing to go through a different mental checklist as you interact with the world around you. there's a common misconception with a lot of people that have maybe heard of permaculture but don't really know anything about it, that they think that it only relates to gardening or it only relates to agriculture, and that is absolutely 100% not the case. Permaculture touches every aspect of what it means to be human. It covers societal structures, it covers banking, it covers, currency, it covers personal relationships, communities, because it's all based on the patterns that we see in nature. And because we are natural beings, everything that we do as people is similar to something else that's already happening in nature. So you look at like a city, right? Well, a city can be akin to a colony of bees or a colony of mushrooms or a colony of ants. Like, conglomeration of living beings of the same species in one area is not a new thing. And so then all we have to do at that point is just say, hey, have you ever thought about how nature does this? How does nature organize, a group of things living together? And so starting that conversation, I think, is really what needs to happen. And just like showing people that you can choose to look at things differently, and that God has bestowed upon us the patterns to make our lives easier, and they're everywhere around you. You have to try not to notice them. And kids are great at pointing those out. How many times have you had to answer like, Daddy, why does blah? And you're like, I don't know. Like, that's just that's nature. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah, I really appreciate that answer too, because I talk to people every Saturday at the farmers market, and I really try to inspire people to plant an herb that you'll take care of, that is going to add some flavor or medicine or something to your life.
Totally. That's, choosing to interact with the natural world in any sort of capacity. Like, chickens are the gateway animal. Like, herbs and gardening is the gateway to homesteading and farming. But you don't even have to do that. Like, the minute that you put a seed in any sort of medium and you see it sprout, like, you're hooked. You're just like, whoa, right? That's like why kids love it so much, is they can't believe this thing that has just happened. And all it takes is convincing somebody to just try to take that first step. And it's life-changing for most of the people that do it, especially if you can take something to harvest. And herbs are like one of the easiest low maintenance things. So keep encouraging people to do that, because it's relatively easy. It's low risk. A packet of seeds costs you like $3. So for, $12, you can cover the 4 major culinary herbs. You can grow them on your windowsill, and you just escalated your food quality like an insane amount. Fresh herbs are just, that's life, man. Like, if you're
So we're
not eating
so
fresh herbs.
so we're talking about like the underlying philosophy of it. So you were in banking. How would you inspire someone into getting into the philosophy behind it, and maybe not so much into the gardening, but starting to see their relationships in more through this framework? Or someone in an office job, like someone
Yeah.
that is, that may not have the natural world. Their vision's blurry. They're in the natural world, but they're just not really picking up on it.
I think it really depends on the person, right? I think introducing them to a concept by asking questions is often the best way. I can remember one of the analysts I trained. He was a city kid. He didn't know anything about anything because he'd just been out of college. And we were talking about a development that we were financing. And it was, a typical, subdivision or whatever. And it was very plain. And I contrasted that with a different development that was done really, really well up in the hills, that, mimicked more natural patterns with like the roads going through it, just as an example. And I was like, hey, have you noticed how those roads are on contour? Have you driven through that neighborhood and noticed how much easier it is to get around as opposed to, going straight up the hill in the wintertime and you can't go anywhere, right? Like, they paid attention to the way animals move through the landscape, where they don't go straight up, they traverse across at a slight incline. And he's like, oh, yeah. And then you talk about, how neighborhood streets feed into more major streets, which then feed into the freeway. Like, that's still, it may be squares or it might be, different shapes, but it's still the same pattern of a river system. So I really think the best way to introduce people to that is to ask them loaded questions where you can point to the principle at play.
Very Socratic. So
else you got,
disturbance.
I'm just enjoying the silence. I'm like, this is great. Like, there's 6 people on the screen and we can just hold a moment and just be chilling. Like, that's cool.
I'm going to disturb the silence with the word disturbance. Something that I map on my Enneagram is terms like daikiosune is the old Greek word for justice, having justice. But I'm thinking about your aspect of sometimes you need to disturb the garden or become the sacrificial hand at work. But yeah, I'm thinking about daikiosune is kind of maps out in the same location, and it means justice or temperance. But yeah, I just think it's fascinating that the words actually kind of sound the same. Disturbance, daikiosune, and also discernment is also on the same location. So I just find it I find it fascinating how these words, they tell us that they're so ancient, but they still kind of sound the same to me.
Totally. And you could look at that from a really high level view and you could say, okay, well, the appropriate use of disturbance is justice, right? Because that helps balance the scales if you're doing it right. You're taking something that has existed in this other form and then you're transmuting it through disturbance to be another, hopefully more balanced form if you're, doing it appropriately. That's a really interesting observation.
Yeah, I think of it as the sword of Michael, if that helps at all.
And it is Libra season.
Exactly.
Dude, like all of the clients I've had since we passed the equinox, I swear almost every session has had something to do with like helping them see how things that they're holding in their energy field as unfair or injustice were fair and just, or like bringing their free will back to it, showing them how this problem is an opportunity. And it's super powerful if that can just be your default filter for things that you see as going wrong in your life, or that they weren't the way you thought they should be or what you intended. That instead of saying, oh, now I'm stuck because this was my path and now I can't go on this path. Instead you say, oh, thank you. This is my path now. This is a different path. I didn't see this path. And this experience of being stopped or blocked has shown me where I was actually supposed to go. And it's just so powerful how like things manifest in the body from that feeling of like, it's not fair. I mean, different things for different people, but I was dealing with migraines over that issue, for one person, and it's the real deal. So you got to be like, this is the time of year to really reclaim your free will from the belief that stuff is unjust or unfair or happening to you. It's all happening for you. You just got to figure out how it's for you, what's good about it for you.
Yeah. A couple really interesting things that parallel that. But I just realized that the shedding of victim consciousness is embedded within permaculture. Like if you're If you're doing permaculture, you can't have victim consciousness because you've already adopted the framework of like, the problem is the solution. You cannot be a victim in that. So to, bring that back around to how do you introduce this people to the concept of this? Well, you can attack it from that level of like, there are no victims. By the way, this is a permaculture principle. It feeds into this, and that controls all of our lives. This is that natural system in which we're choosing to interact with the world in a different way, and you get a better life as a result. The other thing that you just said that really like blew my mind is like this time of year from an agricultural perspective, where you're talking about, clearing things out and shedding this. Like this is the time of reclaiming on my farm, right? Like things are dying, things are going dormant. The warm season weeds and grasses are all dropping their leaves. The trees are dropping their leaves. And this is like the best time of year to get in and take stuff back, whether it's a garden or whether it's like, forest that's been encroaching that I'm trying to push back. I'll get in there and I can knock it back with the weed eater, cut back all of the, buckbrush and woody perennials that I don't want, but I still have time that I could sow grass in there if that's what I'm going for, or I could sow, wildflowers or any number of things. You can't really reclaim land when you're getting that spring energy flush of all of that energy coming into the realm. You can barely keep up with it. So I think now really is that reclamation time before the rest of
Yeah.
winters. That's really interesting that you're seeing that in your interactions with people.
Mhm.
Lately I've been cogitating on how the fall time of year is intrinsically, there's a memento mori on the horizons. When the leaves fall off the trees become very much like skeletons.
Mhm.
And it does this every year for all the ancestors going back through time. But then I find it really profound that on leap years in particular, we fill the streets with costumed monsters, we venerate the dead, and we have these kind of fun and games. But then as soon as we pack up the Halloween and the trick-or-treating, the first priority on the American plate every 4 years is to go and vote. In elections, they follow right after. It's the immediate holiday preceding all the goblins filling the streets and all the subconscious drama, because the mask is the sign for drama. And then we're supposed to go in it. They crafted the day for elections to accommodate the agricultural class, because they knew that they had to observe All Saints Day or Deus Los Muertos or Halloween, whichever you want to call it, Samhain Day. But then the agriculturalists would have time to travel into the city so they could do their civic duty and put their little ticket in that magical box, and then come home and the streets are cleared out and all the vagabonds and the monsters have been stowed away, and now we all give thanks. And I think there's something to really cogitate on that patriotic DNA of the holidays.
That's a really interesting observation. Man.
I did an experiment recently that was pretty fun. I'd like to share the results, and I think it's relevant. And so the neighborhood that my herb shop is at, every year they have what's called gallery night. So there's artists and stuff like that, all these artists. And I wanted to do the installation this year. So I have this little device that has this like TENS unit, electrodes you can hook up to a plant, and it receives the electrical signals from that the plant emits. And they're very random, and they're also a lot of times they'll be stimulated by the sun or stimulated by a bee flying by or so on. And so I was recording this to and then basically what this device does is it takes that electrical signal and it puts it into the form of a MIDI, which is something that can be interpreted as a musical signal. And I put that into my software, and I got a song. But what I found really, really interesting is that when I would record the song of a plant, and then I would put it into my computer, and then I would bring my the unit, everything, to clip it off from the plant and bring it to a whole different location in a different time, and I would play the song to another plant, so it's audible. The waves of the pattern would mimic each other. So what looked like random waves on one would be mimicked in another. And I tried this with a control. So I went to another plant and I didn't let it play. So it's just doing its thing, the bees, the sky, the wind, whatever energy it's putting out. And it was a completely different signal. So what I was finding was that the plants were jamming. they were playing song. It would take a little bit of time for it to recognize, but it would say, oh, okay, the scale is descending here. And so it would start to descend that scale there. And it really blew my mind because it really was a visual and audible clue as to how much interaction there is going on outside in the natural world, and how much that can be received through, our own consciousness, the inputs that we give, and even the friendly songs of the plant across the property. And it was just mind blowing to me. And I hope I explained that well, but it reminded me of Topher. You've talked about, I can't remember the name of the woman, but her work was hooking up the microphones basically to the cathedral and then figuring out a way to transmit that into an audible signal and basically playing it back. And that's kind of what I was doing, but I was doing it to a different plant. And yes, I have visited. There's a cathedral in there's a cathedral that's like Joan of Arc cathedral that has been brought over from France. So sorry for that aside there, Marty, but I should comment since it's the super chat. So yeah,
Marty's the best super chatter. I gotta say thanks for the second one, and also for the 20 Canadian Monopoly dollars from Louis. Thank you, man. The super chats are really helpful. Appreciate you guys a lot. By the way, since we paused right here, next week, Gnostic Academy, Marty leads. He's on the stream. We're going to do a Vibe Rant with him. It's going to be fun. Topher's going to be there. It's going to be a great time. We're going to get math magical, y'all.
Cool.
Carry on, Kyle.
No, that was it. I mean,
yeah, but we want to hear you talk more.
I was just, my mind was blown because I had always known that nature is communicating and that there are, there's something that happens to me inaudibly when I'm harvesting plants where sometimes I will come across a plant stand and I can get the sense that the plant is actually telling me, like, don't harvest me, like, look up the hill. As almost like the other plants are telling each other, like, hey, we're the one with the big stand up here. We're the one that could be thinned out, or I even sometimes have had, I feel like the plants can sometimes know the future of the land, where I got a clear sense to be at this place to harvest a particular plant. And then I find out that, like, within a month that it's like been slated for development and it's been completely raised. And I was like, did the plant just call me here? Because it knew that it knew its fate, and it's happened more than once. That it makes me wonder that, and also I firmly stand by that. The plants are there for us with the time that we need them. So I know that there's this interaction going on between time and space and the non-linearity of it all. But it was beautiful to actually see this in an audible form as a score. Like, you could put it as like a piano score. It was a duet between plants at two different times. It was mind blowing.
Okay,
that's wonderful.
This gives me a question I want to ask, of Adam, of Topher. I think I already know the answer for Topher and for James, but like, they can get in on this too after Adam. But we talk a lot, me and Gabe, about synchronicity or synchromysticism. to the point where when you have like symbolic literacy and you're looking for the synchronicity in life, more than just I thought of someone and they called me, but you start interpreting your life events the way you would do dream analysis, and you realize like, oh my God, my inner world is constantly showing up in my outer world, like every second, all the time. I wanted to ask you how that might apply to like the permaculture, farmer, rural family, dad life, like what is the synchronicity level where you're at in life now, maybe even in comparison to the, banking Permie guy, pre-Permie. And what's your take on the synchronicity too? Like what's your take on what that means?
I'm glad you asked that, because that's something that I've been thinking a lot about and trying to develop, what it is. So I look at synchronicities and deja vus as two different things. So synchronicity to me is recognition of a coincident that is beyond explanation, like a pattern or series of events or interactions that is so specific that you cannot help but see the lack of random chance in that. And so those to me all boil down to the fingerprints of God in our life, and saying like, I just wanted you to notice, hey, I'm over here, right? It's like, because for me, when I look at some of the most insane synchronicities that I've been through, it's like there is no possibility. The banker data nerd in me goes through and I, calculate odds, and it's like 1 in billions. And I'm like, there is no possibility that is chance. Therefore, the only explanation is a benevolent creator. And this is
so
him.
You're bringing order you're like imposing order on nature all the time. And I think nature has a self-ordering principle to it. But I guess what I'm wondering, as someone that's not that experienced or seasoned in gardening or farming at all, but if your cooperation with the process of ordering invites the ordering principle to act upon your life, like if you're as the gardener, like then you're doing the gardening, and then the bigger gardener is like, oh, this is a good garden, I'm going to improve this one.
Can I hop in here?
Go for it.
So
yeah.
So sometimes even whenever you're trying to establish order in your design, it doesn't go that way. Like you'll have a tree that just kind of takes center stage, and you're personally, I go through a conflict where I'm like, do I have to take this tree out? Like I really wanted this tree here. Do I coppice it? Do I just bring it straight down to ground level? Do I pollard it about like head height and still let it kind of be bushy? What do I do? And I feel like we kind of go through that pruning in our life as well. And I think that that's the same thing that you're alluding to, Chance, is like, as you start to look at your design and you start to like have the feedback with it, you can start to feel God's hands in your life, that it isn't just synchronicity. To us it is, but like, what is it to a tree whenever you trim a branch so that just a little bit more light gets down to the bottom layer, down to something that you have growing that needs just a little bit more light. It doesn't want too much. It needs just a little bit more though. And we have these sort of things in our lives where things are removed, relationships or possessions, things are removed from us that have been a hindrance for us to understand that our life is being guided, and that there isn't this malevolence that just wants everything clear cut and monocultured and just completely turned into a homogeneous thing. No, there is this renewal from spring. Like you get pruned in winter, you get pruned in the darkest times. Sometimes
that's the logos. That's the reason. Like we're in the image of God, it's said, because we have that reason within us that allows us to see, oh, I could just take this vine away and then everything would be not choked out and it would work better. And I'm sure there are animals that make changes to their environments intentionally, like, beavers or whatnot.
Totally.
But, we operate on a multi-dimensional level with that capacity. And so I imagine that that's like, how God would look at us is, what's the smallest, subtlest change I can do where I'm not going to disturb these things that came to grow outside of my intention, but now I love them because they're here. What's the smallest thing I can do that has the biggest positive net gain? And I think that's kind of what you're describing with, like, I don't really want to take out this tree.
Yeah, and I've even seen things that are listed as weeds, but then you actually look into it further through the relationship that it's having with everything else in the ecosystem, and you're like, wait a second, this isn't a weed. Like, it's bringing something else that I want here. Organisms, little bugs, little critters, something that you actually want around. Like, oh wow, I see a bunch of green lizards in this, and they're just lapping up a bunch of bugs that are starting to eat this other plant right next to it. Wow, maybe I don't take that out. Maybe it's getting protection or something else that if I'm looking at it like, oh, that's just this particular weed, whack. And I've done plenty of that where I'm just like, no, that's a no plant. We're just gonna get that out of here. And generally, I just ferment them, and I'm like, all right, you're not just going to the wind. Like, I'm gonna put you right back into the soil in a different form. And I think that's sort of like the challenges that we see in life. We may have to go through again, even though they are removed from us. They come back in a different form, and it's like they've been composted or they've been fermented and put into some brew that's got to come back into your life. And maybe it's temptation or whatever it may be for each individual, but you get a little bit of it and you like kind of get a whiff and you're like, that just goes over here. I don't even I don't need that. That's going to be compost to help something else grow. I don't need to put it back into myself. I don't need to imbibe.
Yeah. And I think that, what you're describing and what Chance brought in is really like the same big thing, right? Like, so where I was going with the synchronicities is anytime that you start to speak a language, whether it's a foreign language or whether it's body language, like any father or mother has experienced this with their infant, where they can't verbally communicate, but you hit this point where you can communicate with them. You know what they want. They know what you expect of them to, whatever degree an infant can. But there's this unspoken communication. And so I think that the synchronicities fall into that unspoken communication. We're surrounded by a huge amount of energies and languages that we don't necessarily consciously interact with and recognize. But as you start to engage with natural systems or natural things, you start to flex that muscle and become more sensitive to the fact that there is this energy coming in or a language that's being spoken to you. And it's the same thing with synchronicities, as you start to see that relationship between you and God. And when you zoom out on that and you start to say, okay, well, what else is going on here? I don't know if it's like a bioresonance or if it is really what it is, but you can clearly see that there is a communication that's happening. Like Kyle's experience with plants saying, oh, harvest me now, don't harvest me. Like, that's happening, right? Like, we have documented evidence of plants telling each other, hey, a pest is coming. Or one of my favorite ones in the spring is the pollen release on the cedar trees. You can see it go through the forest, where one will be like, boom, right? And then one down there will be like, boom. And it's like this chain reaction that goes. So there's a communication and an energy that's taking place that we can't necessarily perceive, but it's there.
I
It's
hear
like I
Topher
can
talk
walk
about
out
this,
to my
right?
field.
Like
Totally.
Topher talks about everything is signaling each other at all times. And like bamboo, right? I'm not mistaken. Bamboo does
Yes.
like something all bamboo does at the same time every year. Like is the sky
Every
clock
7 years.
is the sky clock the ultimate conductor of all of the signals? Is it like the script that everything's referencing back to? Can you talk on that?
Yeah, it's Father Sky, pattern. It's the paterner. So
And what
that's
was
what
I
it
getting wrong
does.
about the
The
bamboo
luminaries
too?
up there are just core. I'm sorry, you broke up on me.
Oh, what was I referencing about the bamboo that I don't exactly know, but tell people about that too.
Every 7 years, there'll be a wave of bamboo death. And it's because bamboo
The Shemitah
has,
year,
depending on what,
the bamboo
yes, the
Sabbath.
Shemitah year. And it's crazy. It doesn't matter how healthy the stock, like the bamboo stands are, they'll just all die. And so, and it usually starts, it's kind of crazy. It starts in Colombia and then goes worldwide. And
Hmm.
it's not that all the varieties die, but a lot of the whatever variety dies, they all tend to die that year. Yeah, it's a bamboo
Bamboo
jubilee. That's right.
Jubilee.
Is that
And
like baked in because
it's
bamboo
not.
would just run out of control if it didn't have that like sort of programmed in?
It depends. It depends. Like bamboo, I think nature does it because bamboo is the world's best water pump. And sometimes these water pumps are pumping water up into the atmosphere when they shouldn't be, especially the bigger
Interesting.
stalks. Yeah, yeah, because they're known in permaculture or biodynamics as a biocondenser. So like a normal tree, I forget how much like all trees transpire water at a different rate, which just means it pumps the water from the ground up into the air. I think bamboo will do something like 100,000 times its weight a day in water. It's like a big straw. It's literally a huge. We call it dinosaur grass, but it just throws water into the atmosphere. So I think the sky clock, the paterner, the pater, the father sky goes, okay, we have too much water distribution in this area over here. Let's cut that off. And then also the rhizomes, I think, need a break. It's just like anything, like with citrus, when you cough a citrus down to the ground, it grows back even stronger. It's the same thing with bamboo. Like when you have stands that die and your rhizomes are well established, the rhizomes, you could get all that wood out of the way. And then the old rhizomes will just shoot bigger, better bamboo after you clear it. So
Is it 7 years? Is that pretty much the pattern on it? Because that's a
it
prime
depends.
number.
It depends on the variety. I forget. Like I only experienced
Okay.
one run of that in Costa Rica with the.
Mm-hmm.
It happened with the Asper which is the gigantica. It's like the really big stuff. And that happened my second year that I was there, and I never saw it happen again. And none of us understood it that were new. We had all the Colombians that we were doing the bamboo work with.
Yeah.
They told us about it, and yeah.
You know,
So
it kind of reminds me of the cicada cycles for
Mhm.
some reason.
Totally.
Yeah.
well, down there the cicadas is like amazing. Like we had this year in Missouri. They said it was like the going to be the cicada apocalypse or whatever. And it made me laugh because there was a lot of cicadas here, but like literally where I was in the tropics, like, I mean, sometimes you'd walk outside and you think it was raining. I remember the permaculture farm I lived on. It was early in the year and it was a really hot day and I was like feeling this like nice little sun shower happen. And the German woman that owned the farm, she's like, Topher, you're getting peed on. And I'm like, what? That was all cicada pee. Like it was deafening loud. And down there's only like three boring, by boring, I mean going into the ground, insects that would aerate the hard compact soil. And the cicadas were one of them. So like there was like quadrillions of cicadas in Central America. Not like, yeah, we had a few thousand of them, like their shells on stuff, but I was like, this is great. This aerates the soil. This is awesome that this is happening. So what if they eat some biomass? All that biomass is being shit out immediately. It doesn't matter. So Yeah, I think all of these cycles, whether it's the bamboo dying or the cicadas coming in this cyclical pattern, there's such an intelligence to the whole system. I have a I like to biomimic if I can. Like I like to see, oh, that's the way nature does it. Okay, I'm going to repeat that.
And I think that like that works with your signaling, right? Like you always talk about signaling your environment so that it feeds you back. You know,
Mhm.
that's that same natural principle, and that's one of those other languages. You're like, hey, I'm kind of retarded in this language, but like I'm trying, and it gives it back to you, and that's one of the more
Well,
fascinating
that
things for me that you talk about.
I have to say the coolest thing in biodynamic farming is brought
Of
up
course.
earlier about how how he ashed. He didn't ash, but he made biochar out of these vines that were growing up. We would literally do ashing of certain insects. So we'd grab the insect, we cook it in a cast iron pan, and then we'd grind it in a mortar and pestle, and that was our insecticide. And that was literally like putting the like little ant heads on little spikes, saying, "Yeah, y'all
Go
come
tell
back
your
here."
friends.
And
Hey,
so, but
since we're
the
talking
other,
about bugs, just whenever you get a chance, can you can you pull up the stuff that I sent in the chat?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Go ahead, Toph.
yeah, so like when it comes to the biodynamics with signaling and how you signal, that's what left the biggest impression on me was like we would use these horns of different animals and pack them with essentially like an herb poultice,
Mm.
depending on what was needed on the farm, or if we were trying to tell something, hey, look, you're not wanted here, or maybe move to another land, like the few different biodynamic farmers I knew, all had this like intuition and felt like that they could talk with animals and plants, and they would literally pack into an intention in one of these like ram's horns or one of these cow horns or whatever, all the different herbs and all the different minerals that they wanted to have that radionics signal distributed. And then they would get these dreams like where they met the wasp queen, and in a dream with the wasp queen, they're like, hey, the wasp is like, kind of like, hey, fuck you. This is our territory. And then the farmer is like, yeah, I get that. It's been that way for a while. How about we make an amends and you can take this part of the area and we're good. We won't tread on each other. And then literally they wouldn't have the wasp problem anymore. Like this
Whoa.
would happen over and over and over again.
It's like they're
And by
discovering
different,
shamanism. Like it's like a neo-shamanic
I
thing.
mean,
I mean, in a sense, it's like the spirits of the land deal, where
Hmm.
just by seeking to
I
create that relationship in harmony with the land, then that sort of spiritual force comes in and is like, look, you don't
that's
just do
it.
it to me.
That's it, Chance. It's the wanting to have a communication. It's not like you're coming in with the heavy hand and being like, I know this is what's best. Like, talking like the people I grew up with in South Florida, it wasn't like it was more of an urban environment, but everybody was like subduing nature.
Mm.
And
It's the
then it wasn't until,
materialist thing. It's the physicalism thing. Like, even though
yeah,
people might be like, yeah, the land is alive, it's got microbes and stuff, but what we're pointing at here
no,
is like, no, it's alive. It's like a being. It's
yeah.
actually it's
And that's
several beings.
and the thing is like it's pretty neat when you can reduce the distraction in your life and slow down. I was being taught how to slow down slow enough where I'm not projecting my thoughts at these beings, because a lot of times they do move slower than we do, especially plants. And I remember having this communication with this pair of palm trees that I planted, coconut palms. And I was really distraught because after 6 years, they were only like maybe 7 foot tall. They were only about a foot taller than me. And I was like, they're not really like taking off. And I'm doing all this stuff. And I remember I was just sitting out real early in the morning, drinking my coffee. And I really wanted to know what I could do better with them. And I heard this really subtle voice. And it was just like, when you water us from top down. And I was like, I thought I was a little bit nuts. And then the next thing it said was, there's not enough wind here. So I didn't think anything of it really until I went down to the beach to like, forage for some other things. And I saw down by the beach, the palm fronds always had wind rustling the palm fronds. But up where I was at the elevation I was, and I was on a northwest face, so it didn't get much wind. There wasn't the wind that was knocking their palm fronds around, so they didn't get the agitation that they needed. So then I started spraying. I would water them from top down so I could see their palm fronds flutter. Like within 2 years, they were like 16 feet tall. And by the time my daughter was born, my wife couldn't produce enough milk. So I was giving the coconut water as formula to my baby girl. And just by listening to those palm trees and getting the signaling correct, they became so fructified. They became so yeah, they just produced so much coconut that I could literally give multiple coconuts a day to my wife and my baby for food, which was wonderful. And that was just being able to slow down enough to like actually listen, like listen to the land. We just modified a big portion of our land, like 2 acres, where we're going to build our next house. And I just go up there every day and I just try and be quiet with the land because I don't pretend to really know. Like I'm like I kind of know what I want from a structure perspective, but I don't really know what's appropriate. Like I don't know what I should do. So I spend a little bit of time every day just kind of like looking at the land. I ask people like Permie because he has so much more experience than I do. I'm like, yeah, what do you think? But it's mostly just like kind of being with the land and knowing that the land, if I listen, the land will tell me, like it will say, hey, this or this. So in fact, I was doing that. I actually shifted the building pad of our house a good 50 feet because at first I had my idea of what I wanted. And then when I was up there, I was kind of looking at it and feeling it and then seeing the contours of the land and then change the position and then seeing the way the dirt was in the land and like seeing where the really like the harder compact, which would be better for the foundation, was relative to where the road's going to go, relative to where I want my greenhouse and whatever. And it was just like, oh, this needs to move, So I think when you're dealing with your land, it's really good to be flexible and just kind of listen a little bit and not like have this like super ironclad, like, I know the way. I mean, at least for me, it's just pretty much because I'm a newbie to the Ozarks that I'm like just taking my time with everything. I'm not like I don't know best practices yet, and I know that I don't know. So I just take it slow and try and listen as much as possible.
I want to ask you, Adam, do you ever get like psychic messages from your plants, like the Jerusalem tomatoes when you're harvesting them? Did they go Holocaust?
No, they usually go even when you pick them. But then they very quickly, they're like, you've got a lot of chutzpah. Okay, you can eat me. Can
I interest you in a high interest loan?
Exactly. One of the really interesting things that you've told me, Topher, about that communication and that like stopping and paying attention is when you were telling me how when you would make biochar from oak leaves, like the oaks were
Yes.
more vibrant, right? You could notice them
Hmm.
more. And then when you
Yeah.
did it from, pine cones, it was like now you saw those. And so
Yeah.
it's fascinating the things that go on around us that we consciously just look over because we're going too fast. And I'm guilty of that a lot. Like I'm always, going a million different directions, a million miles an hour each way. And so maybe that's why I don't get psychic communication so much from the tomatoes, is because I'm not quiet enough. And I think that that's something that we could perceive a lot more if we tried, I think, because there's
Well,
so much really
I want to
going
defend
on.
you, Adam, because I think we all have different forms of sentience. And when, like, my way of understanding psychic abilities is that we have like a whole bunch of information coming at us from a wide variety of types of senses. And what's really psychic about somebody is that they're paying attention and their mind is synthesizing all the information. And for some people that just comes in as like a voice, or some people see it as a picture. Other people just feel it as like, oh, I have an idea. This might help, but I don't think that just, just because it's not the same as it is with Topher. I'm sure you've had moments where you had an idea that you're not sure where it came from, but it was something, and then you followed through on it and it worked out and you just moved on. But it's really it's really just for people out there who think they're not psychic, just do your best to pay attention and realize that the psychic thing is the combination of all of the various things you're paying attention to, synthesizing internally,
So do you think that
Yeah.
that's related to like the genius that you get of trying, like that spontaneous genius moment where you're like looking at something differently and then you're just like, aha, like I never thought of that before. Do you think that that's like the same thing happening there?
Yeah, I got a story that really fits into this part of the conversation. This so my altar is right near on the same wall as my garden. My garden is on the other side of the altar, and this summer I was getting tons of cucumbers. Like almost, I got a nice wave of strawberries, but then I started getting cucumbers just like never before. And I knew right away it was going to be a low tomato yield, which last year was high tomato yield. And I just kept thinking, okay, I'll eat these cucumbers. I'll pickle the extras. I can just keep on pickling. And so there's no such thing as excess here. But then it wasn't until my birthday when a gift came to me for my birthday, when I realized that my garden was prophesizing my birthday gift all along. And that is that somebody gave me a huge jug of rum, which was wonderful, by the way. But it wasn't until I got this like inordinate amount of alcohol all at once that I realized that my garden was setting me up to be nice and alkaline, to be, to not, to almost like I was preparing to have a lot more alcohol than usual for a couple months, actually. But it's that weird little aspect of added context at the end of the season that made me look back at my garden and be like, this little plot of earth has genius. There's genius in the genesis of my own garden right here. And so, yeah, I love
the
kind of
soil
sharing.
got soul.
It's got
Totally.
soul. There's some
That was
soul
that
in this.
synchronicity, right? Like you can look at that and be like, whoa, how was that possible? And there's the whole nonlinear time, like all of that, but like there's clearly something going on that we don't understand, but like it's there.
Yes.
It's fascinating.
I love Kyle's theory about it coming to us from the future. I really like that.
The eschaton.
Yeah, there's something big about that for sure.
All right, James, what's going on with these images you shared here?
Okay, cool. So these are images of a couple of fungi that eat bugs. This is Bavaria bassiania, and this is eating a spotted lanternfly. And so this guy his Instagram handle is Uncle Fungus. He has been doing an experiment. He found a wild specimen that was infected with this fungus, and he was like, I wonder if I can culture it. And so he did. And he was like, well, I wonder
What?
if I like apply it to another in the wild, if it's gonna like infect them. And it did. And this year is like
What?
his like
Bavarian
second year.
Illuminati.
And this is like his second year of like running these trials. And so this is one that like he just
James, there's no such thing as contagion, though, bro.
Oh, I'm just looking at this thing that emerges from the environment at the right time. Like these things are because they're just
So wait, is
recycling
this
a bunch
like
of
is this
bugs.
to use for pest control in a garden? Would this be like
So
safe
this was
for
this
us?
was a natural so this was like a natural occurrence that he was like, oh wait, it's this thing that gets used commercially as an organic pesticide, and he found it, and then he was able to use it and replicate it, and he put some in a bottle of water and just sprayed it on a tree that had a lot of these spotted lanternflies, and they'll like go and
Whoa.
suck sap from trees, and they can do a lot of damage to trees. And so so he wanted to see if he could replicate it and if it would, yield those same results. And I have found different bugs at the right time that their population is getting just out of hand. I'll start to find some of them that have some sort of entamopathogenic fungus. It's like their spores are just hanging out in the soil, but the right conditions, they start to germinate on the exoskeleton. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with cordyceps. There's Cordyceps militaris, which it lives in the soil, mostly found in the Appalachian Range, and and they're host specific. So this Cordyceps militaris won't show up on these spotted lanternflies. Not going to happen. They're going to show up mainly on like moth larvae and like beetle larvae. But there was another one that I sent you, and they're like on locusts. And I have these large locusts. That are like eating up some okra. They're like really decimating some kale. I don't really care about the kale so much, but I'm planting a lot of brassicas. And I'm like, well, if these guys are already like geared for brassicas, I don't want them hammering my daikon radish that I really want to be able to pickle and ferment. And so today I grabbed these two, and I'm doing a trial. I have Metarhizium spores, which is this particular fungus, and it's like all that green that you see growing out of them. And I inoculated both of these locusts with them, and probably tomorrow, the next day, they're going to be sporulating, and I want to put their carcasses in a spray bottle and go spray it on all the places that are getting hammered.
Nice.
And
Very good.
I just thought it was really cool. Super interesting
So
that it's
cool.
occurring at this time, because one of the things that he was talking about that he just found with his experiment is that it had host specificity. So he was like, there's a bunch of bugs all around the ground, and only the ones that only the spotted lanternflies were the ones that were affected. And I was like, that's more my speed. I'm not. And this is the thing, is that all this is going to do is break the pest cycle. It's not going to, you can't kill nature. Like everybody deal. I don't know, not everybody, but a lot of people deal with mosquito abatement. They'll just come around and spray chemicals on everyone, and they're killing the mosquitoes. You can't. It's not going to happen. There's so many eggs, and so what you're doing is you're giving it a rest period. You're like, look, there's too many of you guys, and I just want my daikon. I want this next thing, and nature already provides it. It's already in the soil.
Let me back up to something I think I heard you say too. You said that when there was like the overabundance of a certain pest, you pay extra attention, and you can find one that's already got these spores on it. Like those spores are just waiting dormant in the soil. The soil notices the signal of like too much of this, and it puts that out. But then it's on you to notice that and be like, all right, let me harness this gift that I've been given. Kind of like the way the people with allergies have dandelion growing in their front yard. Like what you need is going to show up in your environment. That reminds me of some older episodes I did with Matt Powers, which I know that guy's YouTube channel. you,
Legend.
James and Adam, and probably Topher too.
Great
And
inspiration.
yeah, he's a legend. And one of the things I remember talking about with him is how the soil has whatever DNA is, it's got the record of everything like ever that lived in the soil. And it's like waiting to possibly just reanimate or emerge. It's, what's going on when we're not looking?
Circle
Yeah,
back,
like,
royal soul, you know?
Are things just showing up in the earth that we that
Always
happens?
has been.
A watched kettle doesn't boil, right? But like I honestly I talk about this sometimes because of the Mitch the organ donor episodes too, where this guy changed the frequency environment all throughout Arizona, and then major rains started coming in for that year and the next year. But he was gifting orgonite around the cell towers that were dissonant fields, and he was changing the frequency environment. And then animals started showing up and bugs started showing up and whatnot that were thought to be extinct or thought to be not in that environment. Like they just started appearing like these little triaps things come. So, I think that extinction is one of the biggest lies that's ever been told. And I think that when you really boil down what frequency is for the basic frequency of the universe, the spectrum is between, you could say, love and fear, right? Like the way that you look at your world is always through the filter somewhere on the spectrum of love and fear, where love is the recognition of potential and seeking to honor and witness whatever expression that potential chooses of its own free will. Whereas the fear filter is like the more fear you're in, the narrower the band of what's okay for you, like what you could accept without freaking out. So in an ultimate fear state, it has to be just one way or you're going to die or it's the worst thing ever or whatever. You see what I mean? It's like expanded potential, narrowed down potential. And I think that's what's going on with what we see in the environment that we call extinction, is that humanity's fear filters are so reductive to what we can experience and allow and what we feel like we can handle, that it reduces the expression of what we see in potential, because all of this material world is a farm of potentials. And just because we only see one potential expression right now doesn't mean that range of bigger potentials doesn't exist. And I think, the extinction thing is like just a huge scam. And the same with climate scams, that it's more an expression like, the old shamanic black elk be able to do a rain dance and actually affect the weather. I'm sure a few of us have stared at clouds and made them disperse or burned a hole in them with our eyes or whatnot, right? Like we have so much more agency here. And
totally.
I'm done with that rant now.
I think there's
this is super cool though. This sport thing, James, like so cool. Thanks for showing us that.
Yeah. James, are you familiar with Paul Stament's work doing that with carpenter ants?
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. And just as a dormant pesticide, because one of the things that he found was after they initially get infected and, go back to the colony and everybody's bumping elbows and everybody gets a spore on them, they all die, but there's still like this time capsule. No more carpenter ants are going to come in there and not get that fungus on them. And there's different things like I saw cockroaches they're using metarhizium for cockroaches because they're a communal organism. And so like one goes back to the rest of them and then it just kind of spreads. And it's very cool to see the potential of it. I get a lot of wild questions from people like, hey, is this what I don't remember, The Last of Us. Is this going to be like The Last of Us? Like if I eat this mushroom, is this going to be like The Last of Us? I was like, no, it might be the last of you if it's the wrong mushroom, but you kind of, so, when in doubt, toss it out. But it's cool to see that if you just slow down in your garden, you can see a little pill bug and you're like, why does it look fuzzy? Like, oh, it's got a fungus growing on it. And if you've got a pill bug problem, and I have a massive one, then maybe you tailor a little, it's just water. That's all he put in it was water to spray on those lanternflies. So maybe you just take a couple of these carcasses, toss them in some water, mix it up, and go spray at your problem area. And again, it's not, you're not going in it with like I've got to dominate this, but you're also, it's not that you hate what's in front of you. It's that you love something that you're protecting, and you're not trying to just decimate just because you're heartless, but you have a larger intent. And that kind of goes back to everything that this conversation was founded on, is just the intention that you're moving with is going to be what is what's going to determine the fruit that you're getting back from your efforts.
Totally. It's gain of function research.
Yeah.
Function.
Fungi-chin.
You know, and coming from that abundance mindset, right? Like you can look at that from all the, you know, new age woo woo. We're like, oh, abundance, but like, no, there's literally something there, right? Where if you come from a place of like, okay, we're all going to work together. Like I'm going to bring abundance into it, you know, dovetailing that with, I don't know if you've heard Matt Powers talk about this, Chance, but one of the things that he like blew my mind with is thermophils. So thermophils are
that was
an
the
organism.
example.
Yes. And so for those people who don't know, there's a lot of different composting methods. One of them is called thermophilic composting, which is an extremely high heat compost. So Matt observed that you can create these. Well, I mean, you can start fires with thermophilic compost. But so he created these sealed systems. He creates thermophilic compost, which nothing but, you know, can really live in, but certain microorganisms. And then you would have like this spontaneous creation of these thermophils that you couldn't explain where they came from. And so it's like, how did they get in there? Where did they come from? Did the environment like just generate them based on the inputs or the frequency? And then that goes back into your idea of
I think somewhat
extinction.
he landed on well, not landed on, but I think he hypothesized that it might be pleomorphism too in bacteria.
It's pleomorphic, yeah.
So that's a great example. There were not the conditions were not right for the nor did they exist, these thermophilic microbes in the soil. They weren't there or in the compost. But then the compost is then gathered or sealed and left to its own devices, and he comes back later and observes, wow, look at all of these microbes. So it's like something that maybe already existed in there either transformed, or something that was dormant came to life, or something came more out of nothing from a frequency resonance match, maybe some combination of the three. But it's so cool because that also happens in our gut biome. Like, I'm not saying that probiotics are bad or a waste or whatever. They're very useful, but pleomorphism explains how I can do a biofield tuning for somebody who's had digestive issues for years or their whole life. And we resolve the undigested frustrations or resentments that were hanging out at the level of their gut in their energy field. And then all of a sudden, gluten intolerance or like for me, it was dairy. I couldn't process dairy my whole life. I rectified it on the energetic level. Now I can do even like low quality dairy and I don't get messed up. So the point is that switch can happen in a matter of days without doing any kind of like, gut cleanses can achieve something like this too. It can help you get there too, but you can actually shift on the frequency environment, on the emotional, energetic, mental environment, and your gut biome will change its expression of what's balanced in there. So there's pleomorphism. Things can become something else on that level. And if that occurs on the microbe level, who's to say that there isn't some kind of pleomorphism on a bigger scale in the natural environment?
Like the fish or the frogs, when it's like raining frogs or raining fish or something like that too.
Totally. Or like when you go into
fish falls. Google fish falls. That's like a real thing.
Right. Or like when you go into the desert after a massive rain event and, you know, all these wildflowers come up. It's like, okay, well, yeah, you have you have dormant seeds and all of those things, but if you really think about the hostile conditions in which they exist, and everything that we know about seed saving says that like they shouldn't be able to handle that. Or you go through and you'll till up your garden and you'll get weeds that nobody of native plants that nobody's seen in 50 years. Like, how did that seed survive? Well, it's the conditions. And in like natural pasture management, because we do a lot with cows, there's the whole concept of like, you get the pastures you deserve. Like, you graze based on what you want to happen, and it'll just happen. So there's definitely something going on, from a pleomorphic management energetic level, that like what you put out there and that intention is what ends up happening some way, somehow. And it's happened so much in a lot of different areas of life.
I can't believe we're opening this gravy portal at the end of the night. It's such a big gravy portal. Yeah. Kelly Boyles, this is a great chat comment. She says, there are no words for the frequency this roundtable is putting out. I love real humans. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. So Kelly, thank you for that kind comment. If anybody out there feels the same way, you can super chat me through YouTube or Rockfin. You can go over to Tippecanoe Herbs and pick up something from Kyle using the InnerVerse coupon code. That helps me out too. And it gives you a 10% discount. Highly recommend. I'm about to put in an order for more of my favorite Updog tea. You can go over to Topher's. You can go over to Topher's YouTube and super chat him like Josh did. Hey, Josh.
What?
And Kiyosaki Bear have been super chatting on Topher's channel. I love that we're simulcasting there. You can go over to familyfungi.net and pick up some tea or some medicinal fungus products.
I'm also selling biochar, guys, on my website. So I have biochar for sale. Yeah, and we can ship anywhere in the United States.
And Grateful Harvest Seeds, of course, the man himself, that we're our guest of honor for tonight. I'm so glad that you figured out your internet's sexual orientation confusion and we're able to get on here.
Yeah, the gravy trolls were trying to shut it down.
And you can support Slick Dissident. You can cash app him at $Slick Dissident or go to his brand new website, slickdissident.com. Maybe even pick up some of the really cool merch. Michelle's healing home. Up, Michelle? Hey, Michelle.
What up, Michelle?
Congrats on your marriage. I hope you guys had a great honeymoon. I'm missing you and Mario. We got to get you guys on a rant soon.
Yeah, nuppy nuptials. Get it going.
Big love, Michelle.
Congrats.
You think they were like bamboo rubbing each other like the entire like, oh yeah. Oh, you're so hydrated. Wonderful.
Kiyosaki Bear on Topher channel says oh no, this is on my channel. Thanks for the super chat here. Thank you. On application of intention on nature, we found that driving with the intention of not hitting the butterflies and dragonflies, they soar over the car instead of plastering themselves to the windshield.
Whoa.
That's awesome.
We're gonna have to try that.
Yeah,
that's a really great cool. That's a great experiment.
So cool.
I'd like to try it with the squirrels out here, driving down the road. Like, you're gonna get out of the way instead of going under my tire.
You can't dodge. You can't dodge them. You have to make them dodge.
Make up your mind, Ratatasker.
Yeah, seriously.
That's how they get you. Oh,
how frustrating.
So you guys gonna go around the horn and closing thoughts, things you want to promote as we wrap up here?
Yeah, I want to start. I want to say that a really, really good way to get your kids to eat their vegetables is to get some Grateful Harvest seeds and have them plant them from the start. Mm-hmm. Have them water them all summer long. Have them harvest them. And when my 2-year-old, when he was one last summer, and he was pulling them out of the ground, like I think his love language, because he's a Leo moon, is like, Davide, you're so strong, and he's just like, yeah, just pulling these beets out of the ground, and they're on our land, and he's caring for him. He's and so we got another on the way too, and I'm just so stoked to know that children will eat their vegetables when they have a dog in their fight, right?
That's true.
And my mind is kind of blown because I've come to the recent realization of the semantical flip that occurs with the word signaling that Topher uses, and as opposed to like the influence of that you're putting in, or the influence of the nature, and putting that all the way up to the macrocosmic cosmological signaling. It's a noise. It's a channel that you could tap into. Hello, is anyone there? Mars speaking. And all the way down to the ground.
If you get your signals backwards, you're going to languish. Signal backwards is languish. I just realized that.
Interesting.
Whoa.
Languish, not language.
Yeah.
But it's kind of close.
That's a good one.
So it's
awesome.
It's a great semantical flip for a realization. This conversation's been epic. Thanks, Chance, for having me. And Adam, it's awesome to talk to you, man. We've only had a couple conversations, but I remember them because you're such a legend, and they're always good. So I hope that we can keep in touch again.
Man. Yeah, man. I love our chats. They're awesome.
Yeah.
Topher, how about you? You're going on with Big Bear tomorrow, eh?
Yeah. Big Bear and Jim Lee. It's great to hang out with you guys.
Oh, is that two separate streams or the same stream?
Two separate.
Oh, okay, cool. So you got a big day tomorrow.
Yeah. It's kind of cool because we didn't get to touch on it, but you're talking about tilling and how like you kind of traumatize the land so that you can actually cause something. And that's like what I'm going to talk about tomorrow is like trauma gives direction. Because like a lot of people don't know how magnets work. They don't understand electrical theory. And so I'm gonna I'm gonna talk about traumatizing something, like traumatizing a substance or traumatizing a human. Or traumatizing the soil, let's say in this example, like when you traumatize something, you immediately create a polarity. It's not neutral at that point. And whenever you have polarity, you have movement. And when you have movement, you have life. So it can seem initially to be like harsh. A lot of times trauma seems harsh, but it's what's used a lot of times to actually induce, this is a very important word, induce movement. And it induces movement because as soon as a trauma is completed, the polarity is established, which induces flow, which is life. So that's just like a little tidbit into what we are talking about tonight and what I'll be talking about tomorrow with essentially electrical theory. I should call it bioelectricity or telluric energy theory. So that's what's up.
For so the stream you're doing for your channel is with Jim Lee from climateviewer.com.
Yes.
So like the weather control guy. So that's gonna be cool.
Well, it's really incredible because he and I have this back and forth because he's dealing with this whole black carbon situation, or he calls it carbon black. And so we're really educating each other on a very, very deep level because it's very well known. The one nanoparticle that's been used the most is this stuff called carbon black. And so understanding what dielectricity is relative to, well, diamagnetism is relative to paramagnetism. I'm not going to get into all that right now because it's at the end of our rant, but like, it's so amazing that like the alchemists that have been, essentially modifying our weather, they are alchemists. Like they're using like literally like prima material in its nano form, and they're putting it in such vast quantities. And then they're using salts. Anybody that's into alchemy knows what the salts are. Then they put salts that are attached to metallic things that can be pushed by the father of air or electricity. So it's amazing. Like
I can't wait to learn. It's going to be a good stream.
If it wasn't so diabolical, it's like really an amazing masterclass of like alchemy that's being done over us all the time. So that's really exciting to talk about.
You know,
I don't know how
Topher,
you expect us to sleep now with that little bit of gravy. Like I'm gonna be up all night thinking about that.
Topher, recently I had a realization that the word paramagnetic is pretty much an anagram for pomegranate.
We eat our body weight in pomegranates in this house, so that makes sense.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, so something going on my channel. Kyle, you remember when you enlightened me about the hidden Navaratri in the summertime, and that the seventh day was the same day that Chump got the earshot?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So I've taken that recipe that Kyle elucidated for us back when the ear castrated event took place, and I'm I guess reverse engineering it into the future. And sure enough, over the next week is the next Navaratri. And the seventh day of Navaratri is going to be on essentially October 8th, pretty much. And this is the same day that a comet is about to dive bomb the sun. And if you watch the tail of the comet, it literally looks like the sun is picking up the sword and snatching the head off of the Jabberwocky, because the Draco constellation is having a meteor shower at the same time. And so the sun's going to swing this comet. The Draco's head is spurting all kinds of space jizz, who knows what. So yeah, I'm kind of having fun with this, planning ahead, having foresight, Promethean vision into the future. And so yeah, I sent some mail to my kiddo. It's going to land exactly on the day. And so it's kind of like harnessing these ceremonies for our own will.
Yeah.
That's something I'm tuning into, making this, my big show.
Mm.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Nice.
Planting seeds with the intention of their sprout date.
I wanted to say, this is not to open up a whole topic, but you and I did this stream a while back on verbal judo, tactics of verbal judo.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, go
And-
ahead, go there. We got
Well-
time.
Well, Jen and I watched the VP debate for we watched it as a comedy. You want to watch a funny movie tonight? And it was super funny because 80% of the issues that they brought up are fake issues anyway. So for the normies might be getting scared by all that, but mostly it's just hilarious. And anyway, watching the communication styles, knowing the tenets of verbal judo, JD Vance was doing verbal judo, and JD judo. I was like, no way. He was doing verbal judo like exactly as we outlined the tenets of that in that stream. So, if you go back and watch it, it's useful. It's actually really useful information. Boulder Bear.
Can
Thank you,
I
buddy. Thank
do
you
you
for the
mind if
super chat, man.
do you mind if I make a recommendation about I don't know how to say this, oxymoronic verbal judo?
Okay.
So last night, Mackenzie and I just happened to come across a Will Ferrell spoof where I guess one of his comedy company's troops, they would take Hallmark classic movies and then they would make the movie with the same exact cadence in all the themes of that movie, but they would make it into a horror film. And what is so hilarious is there's no jokes that are told. What is so funny about it is how deadpan and serious they are throughout the entire thing, right? I could not stop laughing, and there's literally not one joke being said. And all they're doing is they're playing, they talk exactly with what's the Lifetime? You guys ever see a movie on Lifetime? They all play off the same Oh, whatever chance. I know
Never
you've
seen
watched
one.
Lifetime. I know you watch Lifetime all the time, bro.
You owe so much money just for that admission.
No, like Lifetime, the Lifetime shows, they're all the same script, and it's all appeal to emotion. Everything's an appeal to emotion. Don't ruffle anybody's feathers. I could not stop laughing in this Will Ferrell spoof of it because I think it was called Deadly Adoption. Like it was just the name is funny, and he overacts that way, and it was just like I don't know if I'm bringing this up where it's relevant, but it's like a way of communicating just how freaking silly certain things are, like elections or whatever, by using their own cadences, by using their own signaling mechanisms that are always trying to appeal to you. But because you know Will Ferrell is such and such, and because you know this other actress is so funny, but they never ever do a joke, ever. And that's what makes it even that much funnier. So I just wanted to make that recommendation.
All right, Adam, you want to give some closing thoughts before we pass it to James? Promo
Sure.
your stuff.
Yeah, so you can find us at gratefulharvestseeds.com. Yeah, that's this has been so awesome. Just deep diving some gravy and getting to share some thoughts and hear how you guys think about those two things. Yeah, this has been great, man.
You could do the content thing if you're not, too busy for it.
The content
No.
thing?
Don't tell him another thing to do.
But he's so eloquent. He's so inspirational.
Well, I was already told today that I'm building custom cabinets and countertops, and
think about all the times that somebody's
That's
like,
right.
"How do I do this thing, Adam?"
Yeah.
And you're like, "I just told 3 other people last week how to do this." If you just had a YouTube where you're like, "Watch this video," it would actually save you time.
It probably would. Yeah,
No.
I started trying to put some stuff out on Instagram, and I just got busy. I think maybe what I need to do is buy a midget and just like strap them to my back with like, the necessary gear to just, they can decide. I'll train the midget so it can decide when to
Homunculus.
record.
Yeah, you just need a homunculus. You can grow
Yeah,
one
exactly.
of those.
Totally.
Okay.
I like
Well,
that.
I'll put you in
your
touch with the
thermophilic soil.
homuncologist.
Exactly.
You gotta put something special in that thermophilic soil, and then you get a little homunculus. You know what I'm saying?
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
You know what to do, bro.
All right, James, thanks for popping in with us, man. I was delighted to see that you wanted to join, and it goes for everybody, on screen right now, but you got an open invitation. If I'm talking to somebody that you'd like to chime in with, hit me up.
Yeah. I saw the panel of legends and I was like, hey, man, is there any way that I can hop on? And I just had that one thing about bug eating fungi. I was like, hey, this is really cool. And like, you could just
So
find this in your
cool.
landscape. And
Yeah, that's gravy.
yeah, really cool stuff. And you really have to slow down to be able to see it. And so I kind of felt like there was a lot to mold around that concept. But yeah. and, and to go ahead with plugging stuff, yeah, we just had baby number 3, and we love all of the support that we've been getting from this extensive community. We make everything that we sell in our home. It is made from things that we either grow, forage, or source from a reputable source, and it's done because it's things that we want, that we feel that we need. And if Kyle's not making it, then I'm going to have to make it. That way I have it. Because Kyle makes just some of the most wild elixirs, like just stuff.
Dude,
that
sometimes he sends me a thing that's like a one-off creation, and then I run out of it and I'm like, I need more of this. And it's not on the website.
Yeah. Man, some of it's just so subtle. Like, Kyle, you are an absolute magician. And so, yeah, my plug is to plug everyone. Everyone here has a family, has dreams that they're actively living out, and everyone here is an inspiration. I got to speak with Adam at the first Beartaria festival, just very briefly. I mean, dude, you were being like pulled every which way, super busy, and it was the I don't know, I haven't been to the other ones yet, so it was
That
so
first
eventful because
festival is where I
everyone.
met everybody here except Gabe. I already knew Gabe, but all the rest of the people here I met for the first time at that festival. It was so great.
It was awesome.
What?
Yeah, and Joffrey is here with me, my oldest, and he's telling me, "Thank you, Mr. Kyle, for that medicine that you made because it's helping him with his itchies." He's got an itchy bite, but
That's
yeah,
a testimonial.
it's a good testimonial. It's probably poison ivy. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for letting me come on here and speak with all you guys and hear what y'all have to say. I was going to tune in anyways, but it's really great to be a part of it and just ask some questions and exchange the wisdom that everyone here brings to the table. So thanks a lot, familyfunguy.net, and and visit everyone else's website and support them.
All right, man. Nailed it. Fist bump.
You did way better job plugging than I did.
I mean, I would just go around and plug everybody again. James did a good job though. We gotta bounce at some point. Hit me up for Battlefield Tuning though. InnerVersePodcast.com/sound-healing. You know, you might be ready for that. It's never a wrong time. And
Ready
still
to
got
get
some open.
pleomorphized.
I got openings in October. I'll be honest, you know, that your date might shift because our date might come, you know, inexplicable time, but can't wait for that. Looking forward to stuff I got on the calendar, recording a new Inner World with Dylan tomorrow. And so we're out of here. Much love, everybody. Good night. Peace.
Good
Big
night.
love.
night.
Much
Thank you.
respect, y'all.
Yeah.